Okay, it is Saturday, January 17th. I am at Kiwani High School to see their production of Once Upon a Mattress, which I have never seen before. I know it's a version of The Princess and the Pea, which I don't remember that story super well, so I'm excited to see that. Um, I'm very early, so I might go do something else first. Seems like there's sports happening here, so maybe I'll just stay because I have a parking spot, but we'll see how the show goes. Okay, Once Upon a Mattress. I'm going to warn you right now, there's going to be a fair amount of tangents and side stories in this video, but we'll try to power through. Let's start with my personal history with Once Upon a Mattress, as well as The Princess and the Pea, upon which Once Upon a Mattress is based. So I first heard of, or at least first remember hearing of Once Upon a Mattress when I was in college. And the theater school was putting that show on. I don't remember what year of college I was in. But by that time, I had become aware that that theater, which, by the way, I was in the School of Music. We did operas and musicals and stuff separately from the School of Theater, which was next door. But there was some crossover between different people, and I went to both things at different times. But the School of Theater, specifically, at least in my mind, had developed a reputation for putting on a lot of shows with very mature themes. Even though it was in college, it seemed like they liked to focus on things with mature themes. And if there were certain elements or costuming elements or prop elements that might highlight those, they would tend to exaggerate those. So when I heard the title, Once Upon a Mattress, I assumed it was something along those lines, and I was not particularly interested in going to see that. I did not connect the dots that it was a Princess and the Pea adaptation. And that's pretty much the last time I've thought about Once Upon a Mattress. I've seen the name pop up over the years here and there. You know, it's a play on Once Upon a Time, which is a very common phrase, so I'm sure it's crept into my brain, but haven't really thought about it until I got an advertisement for this high school show, and I was like, wait a minute, something's not right there. So I looked into it, and I'm like, oh, it's a fairy tale. It's not an adult themed show, although quite a few more adult elements that I'll just say I wasn't super comfortable watching high schoolers perform, but certainly nowhere near the level that I had originally thought back when I was in college. So that's my Once Upon a Mattress history. As for The Princess and the Pea, it's one of those things that, like, people know fairy tales, but most people don't, like, actually know how the original fairy tales went, right? Like, is it Snow White, where, like, the queen dances in red hot iron shoes until she dies or something? Like, you know, I knew the premise of there's a princess who was tested but in her princessness by a pea being put under a bunch of mattresses. I didn't know the details, and I didn't remember how it ended. At some point in my life, probably when I was a child in school, I have a memory of seeing a picture with the princess and many, many, many mattresses and a bowling ball. And it's one of those things where it's just been in my brain and I've never really thought about it or questioned it. And so, not that I've ever put thought into Princess and the Pea, but whenever the thought has entered my mind. I'm just like, oh yeah, they swapped it for a bowling ball, and that's why she felt it. And as I was in this play and actually watching, I'm just like, there's no bowling in this world. Where did I get this bowling ball idea from? Why has that always been my default imagery? And what is the true ending of that story? And so, in the end of this version, they put a bunch of like weapons and stuff like jousting equipment and things like that, and that's how she feels it. But in the original story, it's just the pee, and she just feels it. And at the very end, there's a very quick reference to that where they take everything else out, and she's like, it's still not comfortable, and then they take the pee out, and then she falls asleep. But while just doing a little bit of research on the original story to see what the ending was, which is just that it's just a pee, there's a little tab on Wikipedia that said adaptations. And one of the adaptations listed is another play. Maybe it started as a short story or something like that. But there's a play called The Stinky Cheese Man and Other Fairly Stupid Tales, or something like that, in which a bowling ball is placed under the mattresses. So I did get that from somewhere. That's not just something my brain invented. I've seen that somewhere. What's wild to me, in my little world, is that The Stinky Cheese Man and Other Fairly Stupid Tales is one of the shows on my list of shows near me this year that stuck out to me. No idea what it was, but a lot of what I'm going for isn't just to see shows that I know or that I'll think I'll like. Part of me wants to see shows that I've heard of but have never seen. Part of me wants to see shows that I've seen the movies of and I want to see the play version of it. And part of it is just that I want to see different venues and how different stages are set up and how different stages accomplish, similar feats. But several of the venues on my list, I haven't heard of any of their shows, so I just have to pick, well, it sounds the most interesting to me. And one of them was The Stinky Cheese Man and Other Fairly Stupid Tales. So I was already planning on going to see this show that I had no idea what it was. But now, apparently, there's a link to this show. So that kind of blew my mind. Anyway, let's talk about this one, shall we? I would say, and I'm going to try to not be, well, I would say that in terms of the production and the presentation and the level of talent on display and the songs themselves, and not so much the story, but certainly the character. Well, not production, presentation, talent, songs. I could call this hit or miss the musical. Because some of the things went really well. Some of the things did not go very well. So from the production and presentation standpoint, this is the fourth show I've seen this year. And the third one in a high school. And this is right in the middle of the other ones that I've seen. Not nearly as big and elaborate and fancy as the Aladdin Penguin Project show, but certainly a lot more going on than the Mary Poppins Jr., which wasn't, and neither of those were performed by the high school students of that high school. They were just performed in that high school. And so this is the first one that it's just that high school's show. But kind of right in between them, the backdrop looked really good. And there were a couple, different pieces that got moved out and moved off. So more elaborate than the Mary Poppins, but no like changing screens, no wire work from Aladdin. So right in the middle, as far as that goes. Auditorium was pretty, nice. This is the first high school I've been to where I didn't have to walk past a gym with a current basketball game going on to get to the auditorium. I don't know if I just got lucky where I parked or if that's just how the entrance is, but the auditorium was the first thing I walked into. As far as the talent, the minstrel who starts the show, really, really good singer. Probably one of the better ones that I've heard this year. So that set my expectation high. I was like, oh wow, this is gonna be really nice. The ensemble who sings the next song was pretty good. But then some of the other actors that show up later and have their own songs, not quite as good. And I'm not gonna, sit and complain about kids, children that struggle to sing. But it kind of took it down. So a couple of the singers were very, very strong. The Nightingale, who doesn't come until the end, very lovely voice. The Minstrel was really good. The Jester was pretty good. Quite a few of them were kind of mixed, and there were a couple that probably could have used some help. This is also the first show I've seen this year that had a live pit orchestra. I don't know if there's a technical minimum requirement to be an official pit orchestra. There weren't that many. There's 10 names listed here, and one of them is another music teacher that I know. So that was cool. But it did lead to some balance issues between the singers and the pit. I sat in the opposite corner of the pit orchestra so that I wouldn't have, the loud music overpowering, and I could get the voices through the speakers. But there were still some times where, that's a hard thing to balance. But it was really cool to have live music there. At some points in the show, I was getting distracted from the actual play by watching the pit orchestra, because they weren't underneath the stage. They were just out in front of the stage. But probably my biggest problem with this show, and it's a problem I've had with several movies, several stories, everyone's either a terrible person or an annoying character. Queen's a terrible person. The King's a terrible person. Larkin and Harry are both bad people. The prince is annoying. The queen is terrible and annoying. The princess is annoying. Like, there's no character for me to root for. I don't care about the prince because he's a whiny little baby. His big turn where he finally stands up to the queen, it's not founded on anything. It's not built up. It comes out of nowhere, so it doesn't feel earned. So there's no character in this that I liked. Like I said, other than the Nightingale, who's in like 1.5 scenes and has no lines. The Jester... the Jester, I guess, would be the closest to a decent character, because, like, the Wizard's not a good person. But unfortunately, the Jester also had my least favorite song. But again, going back to hit or miss, some of these songs are really interesting from a musical standpoint. The Minstrel, the Jester, and I is a trio where one of the characters is mute. And I was like, well, how's that going to work? And it's just really clever and funny and creative. So, like, that was really cool. But then Quiet, the song Quiet, I found just really annoying. And the queen is very annoying, and she's the main driving force in that song. But it kind of took me out of the story a little bit, because, I know in plays, sometimes not everyone that's on stage at the same time is in the same scene at the same time. But it was very far removed in terms of the queen's influence on other people, because everywhere else in the play, whatever she says goes without complaint. But for some reason in this, she's literally just screaming the whole time for people to be quiet, and they're stomping and clapping and singing and doing all these things, and there's no repercussions. So I'm wondering if that's a presentation thing where, because I think she's supposed to be like moving through the castle, and so like people would be coming by and she would be hearing noises in different places, but that's not how it reads. That's how the story reads. But that's not how the presentation of the scene reads. So it was just a bunch of noise and someone yelling at them to be quiet for several minutes. So didn't love that song. But my personal least favorite song was Very Soft Shoes, which is the Jester's song. And I will admit, I am not in any way, shape, or form a dancer. I've never done any type of dancing. I don't know a lot about dancing. Dancing is one of those things that if I see someone do it and it looks like effortless and expressive and things like that, I enjoy it because it's bewildering to me. But I don't like it when it's inserted into something in what I feel is an unnecessary way. Now, a lot of musicals have dancing, right? But like usually it's part of a song, but like even like Mary Poppins, right? In the movie, there's extended dance breaks, and I'm like, okay, I'd be okay if we took a few of those out. But they show kind of the personality of Bert, right, and his friends, and so like I kind of give that kind of stuff a pass. The Jester is not a main character. I mean, he's a supporting character, but this song is about his father. It doesn't play into the story at all. It doesn't explain anything about the way the Jester is. At least that I couldn't take anything away from that. And this whole song is just a setup for the Jester to have a very long, extended dance sequence. But like I said, I am aware that that's a bias of mine. That is not something that I enjoy. I know other people would enjoy that. So I'm not going to consider that a critique of the show being bad. Just for my own personal opinion, I don't appreciate having several minutes of a 2 hour long show, 2.5 hour long show, dedicated to just one guy dancing around the stage. He did well, right? I'm not critiquing his ability. But like ensemble dance scenes to me are more interesting because you get to see the interplay and the movement and the costumes flowing around, and like to me that's more visually interesting. And it also highlights the importance of the choreography and everything blending together and mixing well. And when it's just one person, I know this isn't accurate, but the way my brain works, it's just like, well, he's just kind of out there doing stuff. Like there's not a narrative to the dance, or at least I'm not picking up a narrative to the dance. So maybe that's something that I can learn to appreciate more over the course of this year as I'm seeing a lot of these shows. One of the people I'm inviting to these shows with me mentioned, she's like, I don't want to see a ballet. I don't have no interest in seeing a ballet. And like, that's one of those things that like, I kind of want to go experience one. Not that like, oh yeah, I think that'd be really cool, but like, I've never seen a ballet, and I'm a music teacher. I feel like I should see one. So like, I haven't seen any Swan Lakes around. I think that's the one I would be most interested in. But like, I know Cinderella pops up every now and then. Nutcracker just happened last year, so maybe that would pop up again this year. And it's like, I wish I had a better understanding of dance and appreciation for dance, but it's one of those things that like, sometimes I'll see someone doing a dance and I can't define why, and I'm just like, that looks awesome. That looks like an expressive, like I said, when it looks effortless to me, that's when it kind of moves past my cynical side. And by the way, it's not just men versus women, right? It's not like I only like it when girls dance and I don't like it when boys dance. There's plenty of women that I don't like the way that they dance, and there's plenty of men that I'm like, yeah, that looks really cool. So it's not that. But I don't know enough about it to be able to identify what kind of elements I like and which ones I don't. The best that I can say is that when it looks effortless, when I can feel that it's expressing something and it's not just a show of talent or ability, that's when it pulls something out of me. That's when it makes me feel something, and that's when I appreciate it. Um, this is a long video. This is the longest one I've made so far. I don't really think I have anything big to say about this. They were selling crowns and tiaras as a fundraiser, which I thought was a neat idea. The Penguin Project was selling penguin stuff as fundraisers, so I like the idea of not just having some concession food available at intermission, but having unique, specific, themed merchandise, not merchandise, but themed things to buy as fundraisers. That's something that I'm going to keep track of among different shows and different venues and how different places do that. But that's all I got to say about this. Hit or miss the musical. I will say I didn't know it was a musical before I got there, so I think the music helped more than it hurt. I think if there were no music, I would have liked it even less, because it would have just been annoying character. Oh, I forgot one of the songs, Sensitivity. It's in 5, or at least most of it's in 5, and you could argue 5/4 versus 10/8. Whatever. Point is, it's not in 4/4 time or 3/4 time or 2/4 time. There seemed like there were parts of it that were 6/8 time. I could be wrong about that. I was like sitting in my chair trying to figure it out, but unless I'm really, really off, it seems like most of Sensitivity, the song, was in 5, which was hard for me to tell at first, because when I think of 5/4 time, I think of it from a drummer's standpoint and the bass and the snare interplay. And they had an electronic drum set there as part of the pit, but there was no drums in the 5/4 section. And then when the drums came in, that's when it seemed like it switched to 6/8. And then when it went back to 5, the drums dropped out again. So I'm like, that's weird, because to me the drums would help feel the 5/4 more. I'm like, maybe the drummer just can't drum in 5/4 time. Like, it's a tricky thing to do. So I don't know. That was interesting. So having a trio where one of the characters is mute and a piece in 5, like, that stuff I thought was interesting. And it makes me wonder if there were other elements in the other songs that were interesting from a creative standpoint like that I just didn't pick up on, or I just missed because I wasn't really pulled into it. But those ones at least stuck out to me as interesting. And like I said, the Nightingale sounded really nice. So without those 3, I'm not sure, even though, like I said, I didn't love the Jester and I didn't like the Quiet song, I still think the highs of the musical things I did like outweighed the lows of the musical things I didn't like, and overall made the show slightly more positive for me. I didn't hate it, but I was kind of bored, and I was supposed to have 2 friends come with me, and they bailed on me, and I was like, yeah, I think you probably lucked out, because it wasn't very good. But I'm glad I went and saw it. And like I said, about half of it, from the production to the presentation to the kids to the songs, about half of it was pretty good. And about half of it I didn't care for. But could be worse, right? That's all I got. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.